change your thoughts and you change your world. Norman Vincent Peale. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your hostess, Shamiza Ali, and it is truly a pleasure being here with you this evening. Good evening to everyone joining us on Facebook and on YouTube. Tonight's topic is update on the education sector, including the GTU strike. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, and the Caribbean. Funding support is by well known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh.
Thank you very much, Shamiza, and welcome to our viewers.
Our panelists are Professor Muniram Badu and Dr. Ganga Ramdas.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Our guest tonight is the Minister of Education, the Honorable Priya Manickchand.
It's good night. Good night, everybody, and good night to all your viewers, both in Guyana and overseas.
Pleasure having you here this evening. Minister, Dr. Tara, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Shamiza, and welcome to the Honorable Minister of Education, Priya Manickchand. I know you have been very busy. You have been preoccupied with the strike and other matters of state and education in particular. I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Ganga Ramdas and Professor Muniram Badu, for being part of this. Both of them have a vested interest in education, higher education. Both of them had senior positions at universities. As a matter of fact, Professor Muniram was also head of the Department of Civil Engineering at UG, and he went on to overseas. He did his doctorate in civil engineering at Cambridge University, and then he was a full professor at University in Arizona. And Dr. Ganga was head of the Department of International Economics, International Relations Economics at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. Both of them, Dr. Ganga was also in charge of a desk at the Bank of Guyana while he was still living in Guyana and working. Now, we have a lot of issues to discuss in the education sector, but if you can focus a bit on, I know people, especially Guyanese in diaspora, would like to have an update on the strike and some of the underlying issues. And if you can address that, but one of the things I just want to clarify before it slipped me, I read in a report that at any one time, about 30% of the teachers might not be on the job in any one day. Is that correct or an exaggeration? Can't hear.
It is an unfortunate truth. It is accurate, and that's the least. At any given point, at least 30% of teachers are not in school. And for me, it's very sad because for any day that any teacher isn't there, I mean, we're now looking at it on a large scale as we did during COVID, when teachers were out of the classroom. We know the danger of that and how we could never really recover that time. And so every day we have those kinds of absences happening. I don't think it's all just delinquent behavior. The teaching service is made up of primarily women, mostly women. And so we have all kinds of issues, including pregnancies and maternity leave, and then illnesses that are unique to women. And then we have so some of it is legitimate, some of it is justified. What the system has to do, unfortunately, is recalibrate to make sure those absences don't hurt children. And of course, once we get back to a level of normalcy, we have to talk about some of these things. We have to talk about how unacceptable that actually is. We have to talk about how having children write a grade 6 exam after 8 years of formal schooling with at least six to eight teachers, um, how very poor the system is, and those classrooms are if children are at grade 6 and can't read and write. So these are some of the issues we're gonna have to talk about hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's
One,
accountable? Who's going to be held accountable for that?
yeah,
And we're seeing massive investment in the system
one
now.
of the things I've been following this story very carefully, and my other colleagues here have also been doing that. There is this big call by the union for massive increase. Um, I look at the figures and I note between 2022 and 2023, teachers' salary increased on the range of 17.3 to 23.6%. And what bothers me the most is you can talk about increase in salary, but are we talking at the same time about increase in productivity, better quality education, better results? What have been the failure rate, like in maths and science in particular, in English?
Well, and so perhaps we've been a little bit too gentle. Over the years, we have seen an a steady growth in almost all the metrics. So when we first came into office in 92, we had about 30% of our teachers trained, with only less than 30% of our children being able to access high schools, and classrooms that were overcrowded or absent. We have changed out all of that. We're now at a place where we have more teachers trained or in training than ever before. So we have about 14,000 teachers being paid every month. We have 100% of our teachers trained or in training. We have classrooms more than we have ever had in the history of the country. In fact, the UN has declared us as having achieved universal primary education. The massive build out that's happening now, about 30 secondary schools going up across the country, will see us having universal secondary education before the end of next year. So there are all these investments, and then we have the welfare type investments of providing breakfast or lunch and cash grants, um, and textbooks and other learning support resources. We have we're paying teachers more by giving allowances for degrees and masters and PhDs. We are training teachers more. So we have about 30% of our teachers now, training at no cost to themselves and at no loss of salary, on our in countries across the world, in universities from countries across the world, on our gold scholarship, doing masters and PhDs and postgrads. We're really investing a lot into the system. We're going to have to start seeing some proportionate results, and we're going to have to start talking about that. I think it's fine to call for better salaries and so on. I think it's ridiculous when people are unreasonable. I just saw a program where two pensioners were discussing and persuading teachers in this sixth week of the strike, persuading teachers that it's okay to be political during this time, that they should not go back into the classroom when negotiations are going on, and that they should ask for 50% as an increase. And they're reminiscing fondly about the 1960s, when people couldn't pass their strike or they would be thrown into the trench, and all kinds of other destructive conversations happening with a view to working on exploiting teachers by working on their emotions. So it's fine to call for more. I think the system is going to have to become more accountable, and accountable has to mean that, like any other profession, you don't perform, then there has to be mandatory retraining or exit.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga.
Yeah, it appears based on what Minister has just said that many of the issues are efficiency related, and those things can be handled, but we need a formal way. And I would suggest that assessment based performances and evaluations should be a step that is worth taking right away, because you would have in your hand the tools necessary to make informed decisions. So, classroom, all kinds of assessments, from environment, teaching environment, student performances, and of course, teacher accountability can be worked into the assessment processes. So that's number one. And then the focus would be, of course, as Minister mentioned, efficiency issues. This would make the job a little less complex, and of course, it would be more enjoyable for both administrators when they visit these schools, and teachers and students. It was a joy to have education officers come to primary schools, I recall, and it was such a pleasant experience, and it softened the environment so much that learning began to flourish. And I must say that in all my schools, I always finish 1 year ahead. I didn't go to the last year because I was so enthusiastic and motivated that I passed all my exams, including external exams. So we want that kind of ambience and environment to come back to our students. It's really a touching. I taught at East Ramveld Secondary School and Covent Garden Secondary Schools. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Tar, for this opportunity. Thank you, Minister, for the update. We appreciate it.
You'd like to respond to any of the comments made by Dr. Ganga, Minister?
No, I think one we had identified prior to coming into office. I remember this robust conversation that the general secretary engaged in with me about what I thought was the weakest part of the ministry, and I said, with a 30-second pause, M&E, monitoring and evaluating. So we put all these programs in, we start all these things, and then we don't monitor to make sure it's effective and that it's effectively being implemented so that we could make sure the results are there. So sometimes, and I want to be clear because somebody might misinterpret what I said earlier. In some cases, you have delinquents that causes uh, poor results in children, and poor results is more than a number. It's more than a pass rate. It's about changing lives, or dooming people to a life of ignorance. And so sometimes it is delinquents, but I think it's more a culture of us not checking from class to class. And I say us loosely, I mean the school system, the individual management of each school, checking to see you're promoting kids from class to class. And have we met the benchmarks for this particular year level, age appropriate? And should we just begin teaching um, at the next year level, or do we measure and diagnose what's wrong before we move on? And I think that's something that has to become a norm in the system. And I say in the system across the book. I know people sometimes speak of public versus private education with a fallacious view that the private schools are doing much better. And that's not necessarily so. We have many private schools, and some shine really brightly, and they mask those who are not performing also. Um, and so it has to be something built into education, the monitoring, the evaluation. It's not only Guyana, it's a worldwide conversation being had right now about how to, in the 2000s, we were talking about access. The entire world is now talking about quality and making sure what is delivered in the classroom is effective to make children who are competitive and productive as adults. And so Guyana has to take that a step up too, to make sure we get to that place. And we're not
Thank
there
you.
yet.
Thank you, Minister. Professor Budu.
Yeah. Before I dialogue with you, Minister, I want to take the opportunity to offer our condolence to Dr. Tara Singh for his recent loss, and we wish him well. Now,
All right.
Minister, because you're involved in many transformational matters in education, and there is an active teacher strike, I want to ask you a series of questions that require short but factual answers. And this is to bring clarity to some of the issues that are out there. And I ask for your indulgence in providing these answers. Now, more than 50% of the disputed issues with the Guyana Teachers Union have been settled. Is that correct?
We did have disputed issues. So let me tell you how this started. The Bar Jagdeo presidency saw a collaboration between the government and the Guyana Teachers Union that produced a multi-year agreement where salaries were fixed for a period of 3 to 5 years, and different times it was different years. And other benefits were offered in that agreement, and it was always honored. Duty-free concessions for teachers, scholarships for teachers, a uniform allowance for teachers, and a whole host of other benefits that the union nor teachers had ever enjoyed. That continued and was renewed without fuss every year until the APNU came into office, and they refused to renew, and there was a massive teachers strike. And when they renewed that, there was still, or when they entered into one, many of the things that they had agreed on were not done. So we came into government in 2020. Teachers were not required to go to school for about 2 years. Some were, the exam classes were, but other teachers, for the most part, were home for 2 years because of COVID, through no fault of theirs. But we paid teachers. We paid them every single day. We didn't cut salaries. You know, there's some LAC countries that did reduced salaries and so on. We didn't even contemplate doing that. And then we received a proposal from the Guyana Teachers Union for the so that we could proposing what they want in the next multi-year agreement. That proposal asked for 4 to 1 things, and over the last 3 years, we have sat down and given 33 out of the 4 to 1 things, as well as 28 other interventions that make a serious addition to the earnings teachers are able to keep in their pockets. To teachers, 33 benefits and then 28 benefits. Of the 8 remaining benefits, 3 could not be done for being unlawful. We just can't break the law and do what the union wants. And I think 1 or 2 of them were for the union members themselves, the executive members, not for teachers. They wanted duty free for themselves or whatever. And so we were still in the midst of that talk when, shockingly, the Guyana Teachers Union called a strike. We had a meeting on Wednesday, and the strike happened on Monday. A friendly, regular meeting where everyone was discussing further some of the things on the table. So we never thought there was any reason for a strike because it was a very cordial relationship. If you look at a program that happened a little bit earlier with Vincent Adams, a politician from the AFC, and Lincoln Lewis, you'll get a feel of why this strike is prolonging and what might be motivating the strike. And I'm not saying all teachers hold that view. I think teachers are being exploited. And there is a view, as was expressed openly in as many words, doesn't matter, you gotta hold out. You gotta shy vehicles in the trench when they pass if they disrespect the fact that you're on strike and if they don't join the strike. And so it's very destructive language belonging to a bygone era where these 2 gentlemen seem to derive from, and maybe where they should go back to, because that has no place in this Guyana. That kind of violent talk and destructive talk. And So you said we had met more than 50% of the demands, and much more than 50%
Mhm.
of the demands, and plenty more things that the union didn't ask for.
Now, you said that there was normally there's 70% of the teachers show up for work. There's 30%,
At
some of the
most.
delinquents, right, and some probably sick leave, maybe. Right.
Mhm.
What is the percentage of teachers now showing up for work with a strike on?
It varies. Yesterday we had 51% at work. So you still
Mhm.
have a lot of teachers showing up for work. We're very grateful to them.
Mhm.
And teachers who themselves may have joined the strike and are getting wiser. I think that's why we had this big panel discussion just now, because teachers, I think, are beginning to understand. Because what happened is this: after the court decision, we were the union said they wanted to negotiate a multi-year agreement from 2019, when we weren't even in government, to 2023. The government of Ghana is saying we'd like to negotiate a multi-year agreement. As this thing started with us, we'd like to do it, but we want to do from 2024 now to 3 or 5 years. So we had an impasse about which year we would, the timeline, which year we would be talking about. It was the government that wrote the chief labor officer to say, we have an impasse. We'd like you to conciliate on this impasse and let's sit down and figure out which years we will really do. We thought and continue to think and hold the view that you shouldn't be asking for a raise of pay in years that you were home,
Mhm.
um, for COVID. That's a bit on ridiculous. Shouldn't be asking for a raise of pay for years we weren't in government. We have to be fair in all of this, and so we held that view and still hold that view. But we were at the table, and just as we were about to sign on the dotted lines to say we were going to go back to work and sit down and negotiate which years we would talk about, the union said two things. One, they're not going back to work. And two, they'll continue to strike. And two, that they must be paid a 20% increase across the board, just as a hold on, doesn't even apply to any of the years. They should be paid 20% before they have this conversation with us. Essentially, trying to hold a gun to our head. We weren't going to let that happen. In any event, we have an agreement with the union, a 1990 agreement, where we said very clearly that if we engage in this conciliation process, or in any talks, that a strike must be called off. The
Mhm.
membership can't withhold their services. And that's fairly common all across the world. The employer and employee, when they sit down to talk, it's not done under duress. It's not done with people beating drums on the road and breaking eggs and saying some vile things. That's not how people sit down in a civilized place to negotiate. And that's what we're insisting on. And like I said, as soon as that was about to be solved, they received a call on their phone. They whipped out a document and they were advised to do something that an experienced union must have known would break up these talks. This union is old, it has many years behind it, it has decades of experience. They know what is normal in industrial relations. They know that they have to go back to work. They know that they can't ask for an across the board increase prior to talking. They know those things. And so they must have known that that was going to tank the talks. So apparently their instruction was to tank the talk from their political bosses. Now, I don't
So,
hold the view that
mm,
every union member is political, and I don't hold the view that every executive member is acting based on political instructions, but I believe there are rogue elements in the Guyana Teachers Union, and the union needs to be recaptured from them.
so, in your opinion, is this strike a political strike or not?
The strike derives. I just explained to you that
Mm.
um, we were in the midst of having very cordial relations that did not break down, it did not fall apart. We had already satisfied 33 out of the 41 things
Mm.
asked for. We were talking about the other six, five
Mm.
or six,
Mm.
not the unlawful ones. And so there was no need ever for a strike. A strike usually happens when employer and employee have reached the place where they could no longer get along by themselves,
Mm.
and somebody is holding out very firmly on. We didn't reach a place like that. We
Mhm.
didn't reach any place that said, oh, we can't do this, you're gonna have to go on the road and force us to do it. There was no place like that
All
we
right.
had gotten to.
Well,
So
yeah,
I believe
Mhm.
this helps to, the APNUAFC has very little to talk about. If you look at the other sectors outside of education, Guyana is booming in every direction. The people of the country are seeing that visibly. It's very difficult to tell people they're punishing and they're not being served, and we're practicing discrimination ethnically and socially and geographically when people are collecting house lots. I mean, that's a tangible thing.
Mhm.
And when people are getting scholarships to further their studies, and when people are able to access healthcare that we never had before in the country, when people are able to send their children to schools, it's very difficult to tell them we're not serving them. When they're faced, and they're receiving these things, and then they look at the color and they say, well, hold on, how come they say the PPP doesn't serve a particular community? It's in my community right now serving me. The only way to break that up, the only way to distract from that is to try to cause disruption in the country. And I think that's what this was about.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is the average contact hours per teacher per year?
Per
You
teacher
know that?
per year. So
Mm.
if we have uh, uh,
An
8 hours,
estimate would be good.
8 hours per day for 5 days a week.
Uh,
So average that.
yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
do the math for me.
No, are teachers required to participate in professional development every year?
So we're trying to, not required to. We have had professional development courses, but we're trying to do an academy now, a training academy.
Hmm.
And we want to move the teaching profession into a place um, where I think teachers deserve, into a professional place where
Hmm.
new
Hmm.
methods and new methodologies, because the world is changing so quickly. Sir, who taught earlier, Dr. Ramdas, I think he said he
Hmm.
taught at East Ramveld. When you taught there to what they need now and what the way children are learning now, so children are very visual. Everybody's on a device. How do we incorporate technology into the classroom? That is 2024. By the time we get to 2030, it's going to be some more things that the same teachers who were trained to do chalk and talk
Hmm.
would be required to incorporate into their classrooms if they want to be effective. And so we
Hmm.
have to have a place where constant training and retraining is possible. And
Hmm.
while COVID was horrible, what it taught us was that we have this great facility in the technology, the internet, and so we could educate mass numbers of people at the same time, daily. And so we partnered with Pro Futuro. I don't know if you know them. They're a company from Spain that allows us to train all our teachers in information technology, ICT, and innovation. So, how to incorporate technology into the classroom and how to be innovative in the classroom, regardless of where you are, to get better results. So, it's a constant effort. There is no mandatory retraining right now, but there are points and grades for promotion that are awarded to people with better qualifications. I'm very, very glad to say that right now, 30% of our teachers, and we have 14,000 teachers. I told you earlier that we have the largest number of teachers currently in the country teaching. And that changed over the last 4 years. We had about 10,000. We've added about 4,000 teachers to the system, which means we have given more than 4,000 persons jobs and so on. But 30% of those teachers are on a scholarship program where the government is paying foreign universities for their education, their higher education, either for degrees, masters, or PhDs. And what President Ali said last year, announced, was that every teacher with a degree would get a $10,000 per month as an allowance on their salary. Every teacher with a master's degree would get $20,000, and every teacher with a PhD would get $30,000 per month. Postgraduate, I think, was $6,000. So what he's trying to do is incentivize training. So the higher you go, the more you get on your salary, and to make persons more attracted to the higher training. My dream is to have a country where we have classrooms with small numbers, that we have 100% of our teachers in those classrooms trained, and that they're constantly retraining. And so that'd be the ideal place where all of our teachers have degrees and not just diplomas.
Yeah. Just to give you an idea, Denmark is one of the leading countries as far as education is concerned. The contact hours per teacher is 600, and the rest of the time they spend thousands of hours in professional training. So professional training take up more time than the contact hours. Just that's for informational purposes. Now, are teachers evaluated annually to determine their performance?
No,
Yeah. Well, again,
and nothing is hinged on performance.
yes.
So
So,
it's unfortunately we're still at a place where if you entered early enough and you live long enough, you're probably
mm.
going to be able to head a school, and that's not the best place to be.
Now, so how are salary increases determined?
Um, some persons are we have, so it's based on qualifications and
Mhm.
positions. So teacher at an entry level, trained teacher gets a certain amount. Senior mistress would be on a different amount. Head teacher or principal would be on a different amount. And then all teachers with degrees were also moved to the high. So on any band,
Mm.
any scale
Mhm.
for the any scale for payment has
Mm.
low, medium, high.
Mhm.
And we always had our teachers on the low scale. So
Mm.
President Ali made an odd announcement where he allowed he said that the teachers who have degrees, the graduate
Mm.
teachers, would be moved to the top of the scale,
Mm.
taking offering more than thirty
Mm.
thousand dollars per month on those salaries.
Mm. So, if you look at a given scale, every year does the teacher get increased based on that scale?
So almost every year teachers over the last, I want to be very clear about that, from
Mm.
2020 to now, teachers have enjoyed
Mm.
a 23 to 27% increase.
Mhm.
So they have had increases. The unions claim is we didn't sit with them to arrive at those increases, even though
Mm.
they took the increases.
Mm.
But it's not that increases didn't happen, is that we didn't sit with them to have those increases.
Mm. So, so none of those increases really are for merit, or they're just for, say, cost of living. Is that correct?
No, right. So it's
Mhm.
everybody that gets it.
Yeah, yeah, and this is strange because even in higher education, some of the universities I worked in, there's an annual evaluation for everybody, including full professors, in which you are rated on the basis of your performance, that is research, teaching, and service. And there are two types of increases you get. One, of cost of living, which everybody gets, but merit, which is a bigger portion, right?
Right.
Some people don't get it at all, right?
Right.
And
So
so it
we
doesn't
do
matter
do,
what
I
your
think I
position
might
is.
have said to you just now,
Hmm.
we don't do appraisals. I think
Hmm.
I'd like to revise that to say we or
Hmm. Hmm.
appraisals are used for promotion, and it's not used for the
Hmm.
payment of salaries.
I see.
Um, and we're currently
Hmm.
revising that too.
I see. Now, are you using the Human Capital Index as one of the metrics in evaluating education outcomes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, the World Bank has said that Guyana is still below the Latin American and Caribbean region,
No,
right?
no, no, oh, no. You're quoting.
That's the 2022 uh,
Mm-mm. So
report.
The World Bank had a post-COVID study
Mhm.
to see how it is. So I saw that somewhere in the newspapers. I think it might have been Lincoln Lewis again, just
Mhm.
happily with dropping a sentence in his letter without
I
any
see.
fact.
I see.
And I told you earlier, he has every
Mm.
interest in
All right.
keeping the strike going so that he could remain relevant. Old man who's past his age, prime. But he just dropped this
Mm,
line, and I was very worried about that. Did the World
mhm,
Bank issue a report that I didn't see? Did the World Bank issue a
mm,
report that I have no knowledge of? So we checked with the World
mhm,
Bank. Where is this
mhm,
coming from? They have not issued any such report recently. The
mhm,
only thing they can go back to is a post-COVID report,
mhm,
and it was to specifically measure
mhm,
what had happened to countries because of COVID. And if
mhm,
you go further in that report, Guyana is held up as a model
mhm,
for its recovery efforts. And if you look, if we were to have a new study about how we fared after COVID, you'll see that we've managed to we've held our own. We've maintained pass rates at a pretty stable place at the primary exit level as well as the secondary exit level. We have stemmed. You remember the COVID during COVID, the predictions for education were two serious predictions. One, you would have serious learning loss that couldn't be recaptured and repaired, and you would have uh, uh, premature school leaving in numbers that would be destructive to developing countries, particularly.
mhm.
Um, that is school dropouts, and we've worked very very hard with that in our sight, knowing that this is the prediction by scientists in the sector. We were really trying to make sure we didn't just walk into it. And so the various measures and means we put in place saw across the levels, nursery, primary, secondary, um, repairing better than
Mhm.
was predicted. And we have not seen, because we have actually actively done things. For example, for the first time in the history of the country, we have actively put into high schools guidance and counseling officers. So we
Mhm.
have more than 90 of our 116 high schools that have one or two guidance and counseling officers. Where we don't have is because we don't have persons with that qualification. So we're trying to put those in, and those are mostly hinterland schools.
Mhm.
Um, we are, we are, so we're still trying very hard to make sure we measure where we are and where we should be.
Yeah. Now, how many new schools have been constructed? How many have been refurbished? And how many are in construction phase? Estimate would be good enough.
So let's do secondary schools, and it'll give you a really good picture of where we
Mm,
are. And I'll take you through each region. Right now, in Region 1, that's at the top of the map,
mm,
we have Northwest Secondary being reconstructed. It
mm,
was burned down by fire. A school called Hosororo Secondary, Quebana Secondary, and we will begin the construction of Waramuri Secondary. Then, not too long from now, we will begin the construction of Matthews Ridge Secondary. And so that's five schools in Region 1 alone. In Region 2, we don't need any new schools. We just opened the Abram Zool Secondary, and we're going to be extending Wakapau Secondary. Is it Wakapau? I think so. Region 3, we're building currently Tushan Secondary. We're out for bids on Neems Secondary, and we're looking for land because we already have all the paperwork in for a school at Vreden Hoop Secondary. In Region 4, we completed the Good Hope Secondary and Yarra Cabra Secondary, and we're about to begin building. Region 4 is East Coast and East Bank. It's
mhm,
separate
mhm,
from Georgetown. We're about to begin building a school at Prospect on the East Bank, as well as around the Diamond area, and extending Annandale and Good Hope. In Region 5, we don't need any new secondary schools. In Region 6, we're going to be building a secondary school somewhere on the quarantine. They're trying to find the land, and one at Oriala, that's up the Barbies River. Region 7, two schools at Jawala and Philippi will be built. And when I say will be built, I'm talking about the procurement process has begun
mm,
or is almost complete. And we're now looking to turn sod and so on. In Region 8, there is a school that we're going to be building at Kopinang, Maikobi, Monkey Mountain, and um, one more place. I'm trying to remember where. Uh, Secondary school. In Region 9, we're building right now at Karasabay, and we will be building at um, Tapachinga, that's in Lethem, Napi, Mawaranao, and um, Masara. That's region 9. Region 10, we have to rebuild Christianburg because that was falling down. It is in a really bad state. So that gives you an idea. Oh, and Georgetown, we're currently building. So we built the St. Rose's, Queen's College, Bishops, East Rhymeveld, St. Winifred's. We're currently building St. George's, St. Mary's, North Rhymeveld, and so you have an idea of where we are in terms of secondary education.
Yeah.
And we have a bigger, larger number of nursery schools we're constructing across the country. Where we need schools mostly would be the hinterland. And so that's the big effort. And if there are any hinterland viewers watching, the hinterland schools are about quadruple the amount that is spent on quarter the size of the school in Georgetown because of locations. So sometimes you have to fly the material to a place. Let's take Philippi. You'd have to fly the materials to Camarang and then boat it to Philippi. And those things become very, very expensive.
Oh. So you're actually making a lot of massive transformational changes in
Huge.
the physical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
What transformation changes are you making in educational content and delivery? And are you resolutely tied to the Caribbean education system so that you are restricted in what changes you make in content?
No, we're not restricted, but so I'll go with the second one first. We're not restricted, but we have to be competitive in this CARICOM, in this region. And so we're conscious of where we are, what we're trying to do. We're conscious of the Caribbean's curriculum when we're trying to change our own curriculum. But we're trying to make world citizens that are competitive in the world. And sometimes changes in the region are extremely slow. So you'll see Guyana on its own trajectory sometimes without holding herself limited to what might be happening in the CARICOM region because we have different needs too. Remember, many of the CARICOM countries and residents are actually from islands. We are not. We have a new oil and gas economy that is going to require more from our TVET institutions, from our TVET curriculum. That's technical vocational education. We have introduced more something called CVQ, the CVQs.
No,
And in October of this year, more than 1,200 students will graduate with CVQs, and they could go anywhere in the Caribbean and work with that. And that's from secondary schools or TVET institutions here. So let's talk about quality. Trained teachers would be the bedrock of changing quality. So where we had, and we've only ever been able to climb to about 78% of our teachers trained across the country, we're going to have 100% of our teachers trained. And that means a lot because there are some villages. I don't know if you ever went in to the hinterland communities. So Georgetown could have a school with
actually, I work in the hinterland. I work in the Tabuku hydroelectric
Where?
project.
Where?
A long time ago in Semtes.
Where?
In Tabuku area, in Mazaruni.
The Mazaruni.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So those are particularly badly hit areas with trained teachers because they never had access to the training program. And so teachers just simply couldn't train because they didn't have access to the teachers training college. We have just made that college accessible to everybody in this country online, right? And we're not only online, we're also face-to-face. So we're not solely online, but we are wholly online. Everything you can do is online. And so where we used to have at most 535 graduates from the teacher training college, last year it was 1,780 of our teachers that graduated from the training college. The trained teachers in the country amounts to 78% right now. We're going to give you 100% by next year of our teachers. So that will not take care of, but that's a big jump in terms of what qualitative changes we're making. What we
mm,
want to do is some of the other things we're doing for to change out the quality of education is provision of resources. That sounds like a small thing, but making sure every child has access and in their book bags the textbooks they need and the learning materials they need. Huge issue on quality because um, before, unless you could get on a plane and go to Trinidad and buy your resources, or you
mm.
have a credit card and you could jump online and go to the various sites and buy your resources, you weren't going to have access to them, which took away from 90% of the population the ability to access learning material.
Yeah,
One of the
Minister, I'm really glad that you said that Guyana can actually charter its own course. I mean, mindful of what takes place in the Caribbean, because with AI and other technologies such as quantum computing, require compute reimagining of the current education system. I'm glad that Guyana can chart a course in that direction. So, Tara, it's back to you.
I don't know if you noticed, CXC just issued a statement, the
Mhm.
Caribbean Examinations Council, that they were a couple of weeks ago that they were going to be withdrawing from the
Yeah.
curriculum or the ability of students to write some of the technical vocational subjects like
Mm,
agricultural science and mechanical
Yeah.
engineering and green
mm,
engineering.
mm,
Yeah.
And Ghana was very firm. You're not taking that away from us. And I was very clear that if you try
mm.
to do that, we'll introduce another examining body that
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
will give our children those opportunities because our entire trajectory right now is to build out a sustainable economy, food wise and
right. Mhm.
in terms of services and so on.
All right.
And I'm very, very happy to say that the rest of the region has also pushed back. So
Mm,
CXE issued yesterday a statement saying it was a premature announcement and they'd be happy to hear from us. But
Yeah.
we're never shy. And that's me putting it very
Okay.
nicely.
Oh,
that-
okay.
Shy about charting our own course here in Guyana.
Okay, Minister. Let me hand you over to Dr. Ganga now.
mm,
Yes, I've identified about 5 areas that show a glimmer of hope. The first has to do with the union leaders' demand for duty free concessions. Uh, my point of view is those who touch the product should have that benefit. The union leaders should be paid out of union dues and not by funded by taxpayers, which is the duty free benefit. That's taxpayers, so that's clear. They should be paid out of union dues for those types of benefits. The second is a second ray of hope is President Ali's 25,000 bonus, which cut across the civil service. So the union needs to temper its demands on that 20% across the board, taking into consideration this bonus. Then the third, and I have direct experience with this, is to move the entry level people to the minimum of the scale plus the current year increase. Otherwise, you're going to have a huge distortion in the pay scales, the salary scales of teachers. You would have somebody who perpetually gets this percentage increase
mm,
and become the highest paid just by the drift of the current.
mm,
So the entry level people should not suffer relatively to their peers. I personally can testify to that. I know what that means. So you bring them to the entry level guys, put them to the minimum of the scale, and give them that current year percentage as well. So that's a glimmer of hope there. Three, and then the fourth has to do with donations. We should accept donations of resources, and that would should include, let's say, Caribbean exchange programs for teachers, so that a teacher teaching in Barbados can come to Guyana and teach for a certain period of time. That mix would and exchange would give a different perspective to the profession, and also the students would begin to develop their own appreciation for their own versus the imported ones and so on. So there's some big pluses to that. I worked in an environment with the Peace Corps, so we had lots of exchanges of ideas and discussions on Vietnam War and so forth. So we have those areas there. Um, the learning materials donations. I have to dismantle my libraries. I have several libraries, but I don't have people to take them. Donees. The space is a limitation. I would
Mhm.
admit it's a limitation for myself. The libraries have limitation, but we should make room, a little bit room, maybe special rooms for libraries. I've set up libraries from Guyana and in the United States all the time because it saves me the trip.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. I just wanted to say two things. One, union leaders are released with full pay to do union work. And some of them actually are seconded, well, what we call supernumerary appointments, where they're actually at the union office doing the work all day and not in classrooms, although they get paid as though they're in classrooms. And then, like you said, we've moved graduate teachers to the top of the scale. There's really no space to move them anymore, or to put them at anymore. So some of that is already happening. As you said, you saw the hope, but I really wanted to point out, I wanted you to develop that a little bit more. If we were to do this with teachers, 50% to teachers, we have nurses, we have policemen, we have other civil. So what happens then? So we end up consuming all of our resources, eating it out. We don't cater for long term. We don't develop our infrastructure. We don't put down buildings. We don't give these children an opportunity to go to school, because if we're going to spend so much on salaries, we're not going to be able to build these schools. We're not going to be able to do some of the things that we really must do if we're to cater to all of Guyana, including teachers and their children and their families, right? And so that's what I think 50% of the teaching service is coming around to understanding that. I hope that it's more. I hope it becomes more. Um, we have to keep talking. We have to keep talking about, how nobody's going to be left behind in the height of us trying to, and without any oil money, we uh, instituted a national scholarship program for Guyanese. We put all our teachers in training. We're building out secondary schools. We are building out hospitals. We're accommodating the construction of hotels in the country. We're building out sport grounds. We are making sure the transportation, trying to make sure the transportation services are something people can use comfortably. The rain fell, and or it rained. Rain fell is so Guyanese, but it rained. It's raining heavily now, and you see parts of the hinterland that are so flooded. We're going to have to, resources will have to be diverted there, and that's always something that it's not something you can take care of. It's not something you can fix. This is rainfall coming from the backlands and the mountaintops, and so it's always a balance. It's very easy, I think, to give in to the popularist cause. I mean, imagine if President Irfan Ali was to go right now and say, you know what, teachers, we love you, and we're going to pay 50% of what you currently have. We're going to pay double it. Imagine how loved he would be. But when the same teachers, with their 50% increase, because of all the consequential effects, including inflation, can't eat with that, how are we going to look after the same teachers who we actually love? So these are all questions that have to be explained. I never get impatient explaining it to the population. Um, and talking about it. That's why I'm always loath to say no to Uncle Tara. I try to make sure I can come on anytime he asks, because I think people are entitled to us explaining and saying why we can't do these things at this point.
That could,
May I make a quick comment there? The
yeah,
key,
go ahead.
the magic word is balance,
Yeah.
and associate with that is competitive salary rates. So once we look at the rate versus the level of salary is made up of many parts. But
Mhm.
once we keep our rates competitive, and this is where interaction with Caribbean teachers and so on would help us to develop the perspective and the solutions that would be fair.
Mhm.
So the labor mobility would require competitive rates, and alongside the levels will that will adjust by itself because of the criteria used in terms of degrees and so forth. So we don't have to be fearful of the rules that you set up. There are built-in factors that would help you manage the system in an efficient way, as you are doing, and based on what you said. So there are built-in limitations if we keep a focus on competitive rates versus the levels of the salary. So you can explain to the teacher, look, this is what we have. These are the policy levers. We have rates, and we are matching up the rates for grade one, grade two, and so forth. And the rest is up to you to go to the next level or get to the next platform in terms of your total earnings. So we have to split those two. One is a price and one is a quantity
Yeah.
adjustment. So those are
And I
my.
think before you go, I think you're going to like this because you said you're very interested in libraries and what they can do. So we have a problem that we're acknowledging that we want to fix, and we're not even talking about the scale, but we want to make sure each and every child could read by grade 4 at an appropriate age level, grade level. And so we're going to be launching in September a new literacy program and intervention where we spend more time reading and learning literacy. And we are actually putting in every single primary school a library of novels, which we don't have right now. And so not only we teach you to read, but we give you the tools afterwards to want to read. I have had to, when I have young children, and I've had to bribe them to get them into books because it's so very um, devices are so distracting and so easy and everything is there for you. So I've had to find creative ways of getting my children to books, and we really want to do that to across the country to make sure we have the library spaces, and the library material the children could benefit from, with a view to making sure that in 4 years' time, every single child could read at an appropriate grade level, except they have a learning disability, which we will identify and use our special needs classrooms to try to correct. In the last, we haven't opened them yet. I have to get a list and start opening them. We were using them, but in this year alone, we've opened more than 12 special needs classrooms in the country, where children with special education needs go there for their specialist education and then integrate back into the classroom, which is the new learning, not to separate them into a new school. And that's all with a view to trying to make sure. So, equity in Ghana doesn't mean boys and girls. I know in some countries we're still talking about parity, and trying to get boys into school. We don't have that problem. We have boys and girls being educated equally. We don't have a gender parity problem, but we do have a quality and hinterland coastal divide. And if when we talk about inclusive education, we are more talking now about um, special needs being included, special needs students being included in the holistic education system so that they could receive a whole education that allows them to be competitive in whatever field they choose.
All
Yeah,
right. I,
just a quick one here. We may move from the A level to the AI level. And in that regard, I must say that I have a total of more about 2,300 courses on Udemy, which I acquired over time. My
Mhm.
entire enthusiasm to help the students. I made sure that I have access to what's going on.
Mhm.
2,300 is quite a bit. It's a lot of
Oh,
investments.
That's a lot
Okay.
of courses, yeah.
okay.
So I
Okay.
can pick whatever I want.
Okay. Okay,
Mhm.
Dr. Ganga, thank you. Our time has passed. We want to thank the minister for being very articulate in her views. She has a very good command of the situation. And her last comment, would you have any message to send to the teachers? And before I pass you over to Shamiza.
Yeah, we have shown through our actions that, and I want to begin by saying, before I go there, that if teachers have followed me and my commentary during the strike, you will see that I was loath to respond and very slow to respond, and sometimes I did not respond to the vitriol coming from the rogue members of the union. I didn't. It gets personal. It becomes about people's family members and body parts and just vile and ugly. And that's unintelligent, ignorant, rogue members of the union. So I didn't respond to those. And the reason I have been careful in what my responses are is because I believe people are being lied to and misled and exploited for narrow political gains or vain political purposes. They're trying to say they're important and they could get constituencies and seats and so on. Quite a laugh. But and I've been very careful not to engage because I believe after this there is an education system that we have to run, and it comprises the ministry, the government, the teachers, parents, and students. And somebody had to have kept a steady head and a steady hand in all of this. Teachers could look back on our record without prompting. We have done so much that has changed the life of teachers. One of the things we did was to pay every single trainee teacher a starting salary of 90,000 or over. It used to be a stipend of $10,000 when I came into office,
Mm.
of a much smaller number. One of the other things we did was to say to teachers, we're going to give you a grant every term to buy materials for your classroom so that you don't have to take it out of your pockets and spend your salary to get, it's common all over the world. They have those memes saying teachers are the only people who spend from their salary to do their jobs, etc., etc. And that's a common thing across the world. Guyana, little Guyana, took that out of the equation for our teachers. And we said, we're going to give you all the money you need to buy your school supplies and materials. And we did that. And so we've done things without prompting. Any teacher could see me or the chief education officer, or the permanent secretary, or any of our senior education officials at any point without announcement. Teachers have experienced our love for them through personal interventions when there's grief or um, disaster. We don't parade it around, we don't advertise it, and we don't blow it up because these are people's personal problems and life that we step in and help with. So we have shown demonstrably that everything that we could do to make the lives of our citizens easier will be done. But we've never been shy to say that we have to have a balance. We have to make sure every sector is getting a piece of this pie. We have to make sure that we look sustainably towards the future, that we make sure when we finish with these children that we're trying to mold and educate, that they have something left for them in this country. We have to be careful that we spend. And if you look at the PPP's history in government, you will see that from 92 to now, 92, we didn't have any sense of oil. We didn't have anything to do with oil money. And without any oil money, we came into government and we changed what the PNC was doing. We said every pensioner would get their pensions, regardless of every person 65 and older would get their pensions, regardless of whether they were rich or poor. We said that we came and met one single secondary school in the hinterland. Without oil money, we built 12 more in the hinterland. We came and met 30% of our teachers trained without all money. We took that up to the highest number it's ever gone, which is 78% now. So we've always been making investments in people's lives. Teachers have access to housing that they never had before. More than 30,000 Guyanese over the last 3 years have gotten access to housing, which gives them an asset and a capital that they could do more with, house lots or houses over the last couple of years. So we've shown that as a political party, whenever we get government, whenever we get resources, we use the power of government and resources to invest it back in people. We've always shown that. We've demonstrated that. You see us giving back the Because We Care cash brand that the previous government took away and increasing. You saw us making the University of Guyana's really forgiving the debts of students at the University of Guyana with the promise that it's going to be free before 2025. So we're always investing back resources in people, and we don't just say that so that we could con teachers. I'm showing you examples of how we care and how our care is translated into and manifested by actual efforts and actual policies that will relieve people's pockets. And you've seen it over the years. In 1992, the World Bank said we were a heavily indebted poor country. In fact, that's how we were classified across the financial institutions and across the world. And we had 68% of our people living in poverty. In 1998, the World Bank did a study again, and they said we had cut poverty in half by those very policies where we were investing in people. And we're now no longer a heavily indebted poor country. We are one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And even without oil, we had moved into a medium and middle income country because of sensible investments and prudent policies. In the 90s, people wanted heavy raises in pay too. In fact, there were massive crippling strikes so that people could get that, all politically inspired, of course. But we had to hold our head and say, hold on, what is good for Guyana? What's good for the people of Guyana? We can't just give in to the popularist calls. And I'm saying to teachers, you can trust us to invest in you in many different ways, not just your education and your housing and your classrooms, but that you will get better salaries. President Ali said everybody's going to get paid better. We just have to do it in stages. And so I implore you to go back into the classrooms, start teaching those children, because I know most teachers, we have some lazy ones, but most teachers care about the children in their care, in their classrooms, and they are worried about how they will catch up the work they use. I mean, I have teachers writing to say I'm on strike, but I am truly worried about how we're going to catch this up afterwards and trying to sneak work in. We also have a phenomenon of the union and union leaders threatening people if they go back out to school and telling them all sorts of emotive things. And then some brazen head teachers, and those will be disciplined, who are trying to stop teachers from going into schools to be on strike with they themselves. And we know some names and we know some schools, and the chief education officer is going to have to find professional, lawful ways of dealing with that. And so to the teachers who are watching, you have evidence that you will be taken care of by us every day, all day, to the best of our ability. And even as we do that, you're going to see your country grow to a place that you won't even recognize. And so I expect that this is going to end. This is going to stop at some point, and we are going to have some normalcy in the education sector, and I can't wait for that.
Shemiza.
Dr. Tara.
Yeah, over to
Go.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. Thank you to our entire panel and to everyone looking tonight. I would like to ask our minister tonight for her closing remarks.
Yeah. So my closing remarks would be that I'm very happy to be on to update you at any point. I know currently President Ali is in Region 1. He was at Maruka, Waramuri, Kwebana today. I think tomorrow he's at Canal Bank, Mabaruma, some other places in Region 1. Last a couple of weeks ago, he was in Region 9, Region 8, Region 6. And we're nowhere near any elections. I'm just pointing out to you this is how we serve, this is how we operate. Tomorrow, I will be up the Demerara River at a place called Dora. Well, Dora, Susanna's Rust, and Lowood, three different areas. On Saturday, we'll be in Waramuri. So we're not just waiting for the strike to end. We're not just hoping. People don't only see us in an election year; they see us all year through. Um, and I think we're very and have demonstrated that we understand that we were elected to serve, and you're seeing that in every minister across ministries.
Thank you very much. To all the viewers, I was looking at the comments and I gave everyone a fair chance to speak their truth or what they believe is their truth. And all in all, what I see is most of the comments had to do with politics, which is very unfair because at the end of it all, our kids are the ones who are suffering the most. So I ask you, put your differences, political differences aside, and let's come to a agreement and let our kids be back in school, let our teachers be back in school, and let's make sure that this year we topped in all of the education sectors like we have in the previous years. So that's my little contribution for tonight, and I hope that we can all come together and do this together for the sake of our children. Thank you very much. I'm your hostess, Shamiza Ali, and you've been watching the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Good evening,
Good
Shamiz.
evening.
Good evening, Pana.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Minister.
Minister.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Thank
much.
you.